Hello, everyone. I'm Abby, and I'm joined by Lora Rose. We are here for the Beyond the Home Study podcast. We're so happy that you're here. We're here to offer support, offer advice, offer just some fun conversation about adoption and foster care. We're so glad you're here. We are joined today by an awesome and special guest, Samantha Miller. Samantha, I first met you through your podcast, Going There. You are a girly swirly, and we are just so happy that you're here as a adoptive mom. So let's get into it.
Hey, I'm so excited. I know it. We always say, Christian and I always say when we get to chat with other podcast hosts, it's just a little bit, it just takes that edge off a little bit because they're comfortable on a microphone. So I've been watching your journey of getting this podcast up and going. And I personally know how big of a feat that is. And I'm really excited you guys are entering into this space specifically. It always helps when you have like a really specific niche to kind of talk to. And I think it's been missing. So I'm really excited that you guys are doing this and encouraged by it.
Thanks. We're so happy you're here. But I have to ask, I did not ask you guys, I have not asked this yet, but you're from Missouri,
Yes.
right? Or you live in Missouri?
Well, I live in Missouri. Yes. I'm from Arkansas originally.
Okay, from Arkansas,
Yeah.
live in Missouri. Do you know anything or are you familiar with Kanakuk?
Of course. Like very, very integrated with Kanakuk. What do you want to know?
Okay, well, I just always think this is so interesting
Yeah.
because like I'm in Kentucky, Abby and I we're both she's in Ohio now, but this is like not heard of here. But I'm a Kanakuk kid.
You are. I bet we know
Yes.
many of the same people. We have
Yeah.
the Kanakuk world is very small.
Yeah, it is, and it's like I hear it's like a whole thing in high school, like, "Oh, are you a Kanakuk kid? Did your
Yeah.
parents like" anyway. But
Um,
yes, I went there for a long time, and then I was a cook too for there, like,
okay.
older.
So I grew up in Northwest Arkansas, which also it's like an hour and 45 minutes away from Kanakuk. And so I personally didn't go, but I had a lot of friends that did. And then my husband, his family is involved and close friends with some of the people on leadership there. And then here in Missouri, something we didn't have in Arkansas that's interesting. So we have something called K Life, which is a
Yes.
local, like weekly year round kind of ministry. So it's like a student ministry for elementary and middle school age kids, where it is like an extension. I think the heart of it was like people go to Kanakuk, you get on this camp high, and then you come home for the year. And some of those kids who go to Kanakuk are not from church going families. And so it kind of filled a gap, I think, for those kids to have like a fun, exciting, like high energy place where they can also hear a speaker each week. And so, yeah, we know a lot of kids and we know all the staff members of K Life here in town. Like a lot of my good friends met both working at Kanakuk and ended up getting married. So, yeah, I'm sure we'll have to talk after. I'm sure we know some of the same people.
Oh, that's so fun. So
Yeah,
if you
yeah.
guys are from Kentucky and don't know, Kanakuk is like a Christian sports camp, I guess is kinda how you would talk about it, but, that's so fun.
Yeah, we were actually just talking about at what age would we consider sending my daughter because she's 7. I think you can start going at 6, but I'm just like,
Wow.
it's like a baby. My sister
I went young.
You did?
Like, I went as soon as you could because my
Okay.
siblings went and they were older.
Okay. Yeah, my sister-in-law has worked at Kanakuk all throughout. She just graduated college at Baylor last a couple weeks ago, and she had the 6-year-olds one summer, and she was like, I mean, they were babies, like still having the accidents and like they're little babies. So we'll have to figure out when we're gonna send my daughter.
Oh, man, that's
I
great.
love that.
That's so fun. I didn't go to Kanakuk, but I was a counselor at another camp, like an overnight camp, and I had the 6-year-olds at one point, and let me tell you, we were still having accidents, we were still cleaning up messes, all the
Yeah.
things, and I was like, I think these kids are too little to be here." And, like, now as a mom, I think about it and I'm like, "Oh my gosh, I don't know." Like, maybe when he's 12, I'll send him.
No, I'm not even like a super I'm not a super overly like my child cannot leave my side. I mean, we live in a college town. I'm like, we have babysitters out the wazoo. I'm kind of like, I love that these older girls get to like be a part of my kids' lives. Like, I have no problem leaving my kids for short little weekend trips with my husband, whatever. But I'm like, something about driving 3 hours, packing a trunk and telling my like 7-year-old or 6-year-old to like have a good week like swimming in a lake and like doing all these things she's never done. I'm like, that feels wild. But I mean, I'm sure it's so good for them.
Yeah, I mean, I think it feels wild too, like, I did it, and I still am like,
Yeah.
"Wow,"
Yeah.
Yeah.
but
That's
Crazy.
awesome.
Yeah.
Well,
Samantha, why don't you introduce yourself to everybody? You mentioned your daughter, but if you want
Yeah.
to, yeah, tell everybody about you.
Yes. Okay. So I'm Samantha Miller. I live in Columbia, Missouri. I have been here. I feel like at this point, we live in big college town, like state school college town. And so it's very big, like if you're a townie or not, or you're a transplant. But I married a townie and I've been here for about 15 years now. So I feel like I'm at that status. But I am originally from Bentonville, Arkansas. I love Arkansas. I love where I grew up. I feel like it's a very idyllic kind of little hometown, and it's now become kind of like a destination for people. My parents still live there, so it's like the home of Walmart is what it's known for. But we have a 7-year-old Emerson who we adopted, domestic infant adoption. We were there for her birth, and then I'm sure we'll get more into all of that. And then I have he just turned 3-year-old son who we also adopted domestic infant adoption, but his adoption's a little bit interesting because his birth mom is and was at the time a Ugandan refugee, like living in Kansas City. So that has been kind of an interesting dynamic to our infant domestic adoption. Kind of like if you put that into a category, it's like he is African, but he was born in Kansas City, 2 hours away from us. So that'll be something that we'll have to kind of figure out as he gets older. So yeah, that's a little bit about, I stay home with my 2 kids primarily, but like you guys mentioned, I get the privilege of co-hosting a podcast called Going There. Our whole little shtick is that we provide kind of deeper conversations for Christian girls. We want everyone to feel like you're just having a cup of coffee with us. So we love to chat about very pointless kind of cultural things like makeup and the newest trends and like recipes that we're seeing on Instagram and loving. But then we also are really passionate about helping women our age learn how to go to the Bible for what truth there is in this world and really using that to define what we should be listening to as our source. And so we hope that we do a good job of mixing it like fun, but also like we're pretty serious about that. We're not just here to like say some inspirational things, if that makes sense. So
so cool. Well, we're really happy to have you. And so you talked a little bit about the journey of, what it looked like to adopt both of your kids. So I want to talk a little bit about your expectations and what your relationship with your kids' birth moms looks like. So, and just a little background for everyone listening. I actually had sent Samantha a message at one point about, I was actually sitting in the hospital. We didn't make it to our twins' birth because of a whole series of events, and they were completely on the other side of the country. But I'm sitting there, like, kind of wrestling through, okay, I know what I want my relationship with my girl's birth mom to look like, but it's not looking like that right now. So we had messaged back and forth a little, which kind of got us on this idea for this interview. So, yeah, Samantha, what were some initial thoughts or expectations that you had even before you had any contact with your children's birth moms?
that's such a good question because, yeah, the adoption world is very small. And so I have walked through infant domestic adoption specifically with so many people now and currently have like 3 friends that are waiting families right now, which is so wild. I feel like it is becoming, I don't know, like it's just, I'm seeing it more around me, which is really cool. But my point in that is I have never heard of 2 situations that are the same at all. Like they usually differ a lot. And if we have like one little piece of our stories, our situations in common, I feel like the rest of it's totally different. And so I guess I didn't have much of an expectation other than my whole story that led us to adoption. I had cancer as a child. I didn't know if I would be able to have biological children. That's like a whole nother story. I did go through some infertility treatments and I had some losses that ultimately led us to adoption. But before we even got to that decision, my husband's youngest sister had been adopted via infant domestic adoption. She's 22 now. And so it's been crazy to hear and see how the adoption process has changed in 22 years. But he always had, um, literally the exact same story. It's like he remembers his parents. It wasn't a profile book that you made like on like a printout book. It was a scrapbook that my mother-in-law made. And, that's what the expectant moms looked at. And so he remembers like going to Dallas, meeting her birth mom. And,
Oh.
yeah, and so I got to, hear a lot. My mother-in-law, unfortunately, really sadly passed away this past fall, but we had a really close relationship, and I'm so thankful that I got to hear her heart and hear, kind of how she thought through things all those years ago when they met my sister-in-law's, expectant mom at the time and then birth mother, and they had a different that's my sister-in-law's story to tell, like, they had a different relationship. Again, I feel like everyone does, but
Mm.
I knew that walking into it, and people say like, "Where did you get that from?" or "How did you learn that?" And it has to be only God, because I always had this idea that like I never wanted to be the barrier between my children and their birth moms or their birth families in general. And so however that continues to look, my husband and I always go back to, we want to do everything um in our potential that's safe and that's okay for them emotionally, physically, to have a relationship with their birth families. And so that's looked very different for both of our children. And it's changed. My daughter's 7 now. That has looked very different from in the beginning, even with her birth mom. But I've always had this heart of like, I don't need to feel threatened by someone who not even gave me this great gift, but that just like wants to love this child and does love this child. Why would I try to compete with that? Because it's just going to create weird tension for, I think, the child if they ever sense any bit of insecurity. Now, are there times where my daughters ask questions and I'm literally like, there's a knife in my chest right now, and I'm just going to, yeah, just pray that God can bring the words out for me, because yeah, it feels hard sometimes when they're asking questions and like you're faced with the reality that you're not their biological mom, that there's someone else that they attached and grew in their stomach and all the things.
Mm.
Um, but I guess I don't know if that answers it. I think my expectation just was that I wanted to love them and I wanted to do whatever I could possibly do to open the door to that relationship.
That's so crazy to me that you had that, like, you already had that idea of, like, "I don't need to feel threatened by this relationship," because that is not how a lot of people, like, approach
Mhm.
it. They are threatened, and, like, do you think that came from I don't know, like, where do you think that came from? Like, does that have to do with, like, your experience with your husband's family or yeah.
I truly think like I had gone through a lot in that season right before we adopted. We had had a late term miscarriage, loss. Like I was just another bit of context. My husband and I was 20 years old when we got married, and we started the adoption process with my daughter when I was 23, 24, 23. I mean, I was young. I was naive. I didn't know anything, but I was so broken at that time, just like grieving, really feeling lost, very just humbled, honestly. And I look back at my life and I've been through some big, like all of us have hardship. I've been through some like
Mhm.
big things that there's no way to describe sometimes to people how you're stretched and grown other than it's like, when you've walked through suffering, like you are brought to a place where you have no choice but to kind of submit to like, okay, God, what do you have? Because even if I tried to do it on my own right now and like with my own strength, with my own knowledge, like this is how I'm going to be an adopted mom, like I know it's not going to work because I'm just so just low right now.
Hey friends, if you've been enjoying Beyond the Home Study, there are a couple of easy ways to support the show. First, follow and leave a quick 5-star review. It helps other adoptive and foster families find us. Second, we just set up a Buy Me a Coffee page. It's a simple way to say, hey, I love what you're doing, and it helps us to keep the podcast going. You can check it out at buymeacoffee.com/Beyond the Home Study or check out the link below. And as always, we're so grateful you're here.
Now, so I think I went into it from just this place of like, I just want to do this in a way that's ultimately going to honor the Lord. And I ultimately know somewhere deep inside of me, if I trust in that, that is going to be what is best for my daughter. Like that is what is going to lead to the best just circumstances. And I don't know what that's going to look like when she's 16 and when she's 20 and when she's 30. I don't know how she's going to process all of this. But that's almost freeing to me when I start to spiral a little bit about like, well, what if she like wants this relationship and she has half sisters that she loves and these other things. It's like the second I start to spiral about that, I'm like, why? That is not what God has for me to worry about today. Right now, he's asking me, I think I told you, Abby, like when I was in the hospital, I was like, okay, I am here to love Ebony, Emerson's birth mom. That it is about her right now. Like, yes, of course, I want to bond with Emerson, and she was so generous in how she let us come in and be a part of all of that in the hospital. But really, I want to love and serve her right now and connect with her because we're about to start a lifelong journey together, whatever that's going to look like. And so, yeah, in each different phase, that has been my intention. And, with my daughter now, it's a lot of her lead. She's 7. I know that sounds crazy, but it is a lot of like, what is she needing this relationship to look like? But also taking in, we're adults and we have wisdom and we have to kind of evaluate all the situation. I don't know if that explains it. There's probably not a direct answer other than I just tried to be very open-handed with it.
I think that's so
Yeah, no, I think
good. Yeah, and I think that when you walk through a season of suffering, no matter what it looks like, it shapes your outlook on life, of course, but it also shapes your expectations for future situations because you realize so much how much is out of your control and it's just not in your hands. And I mean, we talk all the time about expectations versus reality and whether it's toddler sleep or regressions or teething or food, like all these different things we've talked about. And like, yeah, we can still definitely put expectations on ourselves or on our kids or on the people around us. But at the end of the day, it's like, okay, my hands are open because it's not going to go the way I think it's going to.
Yeah, and
what are you gonna do?
and don't you guys feel, and maybe I don't know if this is a shared experience, but I've sometimes explained my feelings as an adoptive mom, and I remember, a few years before my mother-in-law got sick and passed away, I had asked her one time, I was like, "Okay, be honest with me," because she had 2 biological children, and then my sister, I'm like, "What does that feel like?" And she's like, "There is just a depth to the love that you feel towards a child that did like you were not connected to at all." And I've explained that to some people in ways like I don't have the 2 to compare to, but with my children, they're also African American. They don't look like me at all. Like I totally forget that they did not like come out of me, if that makes sense. But it almost creates a little bit of this freedom as a parent as well to not put this expectation on like this is exactly who this child's going to be, because subconsciously I'm not thinking about who I am and who my husband is and like what I see myself in them. I mean, of course, I look at my daughter, and the other day my husband was like, "Oh my gosh, she is like your personality over." Just like little things that of course like they pick up from you, and she's so me in so many ways. But it almost has freed me up to think about their lives and who they're going to be and how they're going to get there as like, I don't know, I'm just along to do my part in the parenting role, which I think is biblically like what we see and how we should view children. But I think I've noticed in my friends with biological children that that's harder to get to because you have this like claim on this child, which of course, like they are my child. I would do anything that comes out, of course, we're human. But ultimately, like God loves them more than we do. And that is hard as a mom to kind of actually believe deep in your soul. And for some ways, I think adoption makes that a little bit easier to be like, I get to just be a part of watching who God's created you to be. And I don't need to try to like control who that is. Does that make sense?
Oh, 100%. I like it is like, yeah. So I have one biological and one adopted. And my daughter that's adopted, it is easier in that way to like, I'm not like putting my personality on her. Like, yes, same. She definitely has similar traits as me too, just, nature nurture. But my son, sometimes I'm almost like I have to take a step back and be like, "Oh my
Mm.
gosh, like he is his own person.
Yeah.
Like let him be."
Huh? Yeah, I
So yeah.
just find that fascinating.
Yeah. So cool. Well, let's switch gears a little bit and talk about how you actually like what words, what language, what do conversations look like when you're talking to your kids about their birth moms? And then kind of on the flip side, what do conversations with your birth moms look like now that your kids are a little bit older?
Oh, just
Yeah,
so
give us all the tips.
questions. Oh gosh. Okay. So I remember with my daughter, we used a consultant group called Christian Adoption Consultants. I don't know if you all are familiar with them. I have a lot of friends who have also been like they're a group that you have the opportunity to match with multiple agencies. So it's a multi-agency approach. And I don't know how much you've gone into like all of that with infant domestic adoption, or I don't even know how you guys did it, Abby, or what direction you took. Um, but they provide a lot of resources to help you prep. And, one of the things I had been learning in our match period and in our waiting was like, okay, obviously there's never going to be a moment that I like sit down and say, this is your story. Like, okay, someone asked me that when Emerson was probably 6 months old. They're like, when do you think you're going to tell her she's adopted? And I'm like, okay, she's Black. She's going to know. Something that A, I would wanna hide, or B, that I could? Like, what? It's just kind of these outdated thoughts that people have on adoption, and I understand why, because I've met people who are adults now who were adopted, and, like, their stories were really different. It all was closed, and it was all, like, they didn't have access to know any information, and so I feel like I was really stressed with Emerson of like, I just want to get really comfortable, even as she's a baby and I'm rocking her, like telling her story, and not in a dramatic, I try not to be like overly emotional about it. Sometimes I feel like I remember just like practicing telling her, like, I remember when we FaceTime for the first time with Ebony and what that was like. And, when we went to Florida to get you, and you were born 3.5 weeks early, and we couldn't get on a flight in time. So I was in Target when I got the call, and I just like left all my stuff and we started driving. Like, I would tell her story, because that just became like a good way for me to practice and feel really comfortable sharing, just like you would a birth story or whatever. And obviously that's changed over the years. With her situation, we have done, not every year, I think every but like one maybe or two at this point. We have done a yearly visit with her birth family. And so we go to Florida, and there are quite a few half siblings. And so people ask me all the time, like, what is that like? Is it super intense? Is it super? I'm like, guys, it's really like, it's nothing you would expect. It's like we usually rent an Airbnb or have them to the hotel that we're staying at. And it is like mass chaos. I mean, picture with you guys, like if you go to your friend's house and you're trying to have a cup of coffee, like you're not, it's not this deep emotional thing. It's just
Yeah.
really like spending time together. And even culturally, and like, what the norm is for her birth family, like we're just there to like see them, and for them to get to see Emerson, and like get to see glimpses of her personality. And that has changed a lot over the years. So kind of just navigating like, what does that look like? Now, Emerson, as she's gotten older, has asked a lot more questions about her story, or about like the why of it all. And there are times where, I'll answer in the way that I feel is appropriate. But I've also said, like, if you ever want to text Ebony or call Ebony, you're more than welcome to ask her those questions, which I do love that there is the opportunity for that. Now, we don't text like frequently. It's usually like a once a year, or just like a check-in a few times a year, like, how are you guys doing? And that looks really different than the first year. We were texting like at least once a month or maybe more. Um, so it's just kind of changed, and practically like that. If you guys have more specific questions of like, how did you answer this, or how did you say that? With my son, we have desired an open relationship, and his birth mom, we were able to connect with and get to know a little bit in the hospital. She does not speak English. She speaks Swahili. And so we had to use an interpreter to communicate with her which always just makes it a little bit harder. But I would just even go, like, she ended up having a C-section, so I would go, like, sit in her room with her, and, like, it's crazy. Now this could, like, make me emotional, even though we didn't have words at all for one another. It's crazy, like, we would just, like, look into each other's eyes, and there was almost this, like, deep just connection, and I don't know, like, you just can't you can't even explain, like, how there's that connection with someone who doesn't speak your same language. But she had wanted initially the adoption to be completely closed, which was really hard for us because we had had this complete opposite experience with Emerson. And while we were in the hospital, she wanted to know us and she wanted to have a relationship in the beginning with us. And she ended up wanting to meet James, which was really, really special for us. Um, I'll put a pin in that because I have a thought about that too in the hospital because that can be really hard. But we ended up she was open to me adding her on Facebook. So I do have the access now to at least, like, send pictures of James to her. We don't really communicate back and forth other than I just send pictures and she kinda hearts them. But that's a prayer of mine that, we're actually really demographically, or sorry, not demographically, geologically close. And so that's a prayer that maybe one day she would be open to us, coming to have lunch or meeting her at a park or seeing her in some way. But that's kind of a little overview of our two stories being really different. And that is something that I worry about as both of our kids get older. Like, how will James interpret his situation compared to Emerson's? And just having to have those conversations. It can be a little overwhelming sometimes to think about the future in that. But again, that's where you just kind of have to be like, okay, God, that is not a worry you've given me today. And I trust you've been so faithful in a lot of details that felt really messy at the time. I'm going to trust that you're going to do that in each one of those scenarios.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
Wow.
good. That's a lot.
So, so with, okay, so like with your relationships with either one, like, have you ever had to, like, put in place boundaries? Like, I'm thinking, like, for us, I'm thinking about, like, pictures. That's a
Mhm.
thing where I'm like, okay, I'm not huge on putting pictures online. And so, like, what kind of boundaries have you thought about or have you had to set or not set?
Okay, I was just talking to someone about boundaries in general outside of the adoption world the other day, and we were talking about how I feel like this is something I've grown in. There are times that boundaries have to go into place beforehand because you know of certain aspects of a relationship that you just need to have those from day one. But something I think if you can try to do, and this is what I didn't think I didn't like intentionally do this. It's just how it's naturally happened. We tried not to go into the relationship with boundaries, but we've had to, of course, make some as things have happened over the years. And so what I mean by that, like, for example, I remember when we got matched and our um our agent called our social worker called and was like, "Hey, we're going to set up a first phone call. You have the option to set like a Google Voice number, or you can just, text freely off of your phone." And the very first time we talked, I like made a Google number and shared it. And then the second we like met and connected, I was like, I'm texting her on my personal number. Like, this, it feels very natural that we are able to just freely text in this way. She's never, okay, like, specifically about pictures, like, she's never posted pictures of Emerson on social media. So again, I follow her on Instagram. So if I saw that, maybe I would have to say, like, "Hey, here's the reasons why I want these pictures posted. Can like, but again, that's something that hasn't happened. So to me, it's like, as much as I cannot have to be this, like, I'm the big, like, boundary, like, you have to be at this distance. I want to try to take each example and kind of like go as it goes. And there's times, without sharing details, like, financially, there have been a few times where maybe there's been an ask that, um, I think just setting my husband, I don't know how you guys are, but I feel like my husband does a lot better job sometimes of just like taking emotions out of situations and thinking like really long term what's best for our family. And so again, without going into details, there's just been things that have been, I would say, expectations that have been set in place early on with some of those asks that have now set us up to where like that hasn't been a problem.
Yeah.
But yeah, like, any other specific questions I can think of just like, yeah, we haven't had to make a ton because we haven't run into the issue yet, if that makes sense.
I think that's so interesting because, like, we really don't have any boundaries set for our twins' birth mom, but we also haven't had a whole lot of communication and contact, so there's not really a need for that. But it's interesting with our first son, who was adopted as an embryo, we technically our adoption is semi-open. So
Okay.
like we communicate to our agency communicates to the family, and that's just like what we knew to do at the beginning of all of it. And we didn't know like how many children, like we knew they had one child. We didn't know if they were having more children. We didn't know what it would look like, all these different things. So it's really interesting. We like started with a pretty like a high wall, I guess, like we don't have direct communication.
Naturally.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just like that's how it started. But now it's like, okay, as my son gets older, like I want to tell him about his genetic brother that he has. And we've told him about him, but will I wait for him to ask to meet him? Will I try to reach out? Like every year we just kind of take it as like we send a yearly update and we just take it like a year at a time. So it's really interesting how like both of ours are like we're coming at it from different perspectives.
And I mean, then I'm experiencing that with my son where like if it was up to me, I would have her phone number and like I
Yeah,
said, would love to meet for lunch or play at the park. But if anything, like that's a boundary, I guess, of hers that I have to respect, even though that doesn't
Fair.
feel and she wouldn't have said like this is a boundary I'm putting. That's just like what she's choosing at this time. It is weird too. I think it's so wise, kind of like I've been saying with a lot of this, is just like taking it year by year, taking it month by month, taking it child by child because their personalities. I mean, my sister-in-law is 22 now and it's been really a blessing to get to talk with her about how she feels as the adopted child. About I again, like there's so much of her story I could share, but that's not my story. So I'll leave that there. But it's been really insightful. And she has a really special relationship with my daughter where I can ask her, like, how would you have felt with this? Or like, what do you wish would have happened growing up as a child? Do you wish there was more conversation? Do you wish there was less? Like, what would that have felt like for you? And it's interesting because even as we talk that out, sometimes I can recognize like her personality and what she needs and what's best for her might be different than what Emerson at 22 is going to be processing through or needing. So I think that's good to keep in mind as well.
yeah,
Yeah, I love your whole posture behind it. Like this whole, don't come in it as like I'm this, authority figure, like this is my child, but like no, like we're coming in we're together, like we're a family of sorts. Like this is yeah, I just think that's a really good reminder of like what is your posture when you're approaching the birth mom, or birth family.
Yeah.
yeah,
In the beginning, I remember I would like send a Mother's Day card and we would send gifts and we would send okay, there's just a reality that like life keeps going and they're really busy and they have a lot going on in like their own world. It's not like that. And like sometimes when I talk about open adoption, it's like people are like, "Do you guys like spend holidays together?" I'm like, "Okay, no." Like it's not and maybe some do. And I mean, we're really far apart distance-wise and so like that's just not the reality, but, it's just you really have to take it like situation by situation, one step at a time and figure out what's going to be the norm. I think I used to just get really stressed out and be like, I want to like make a craft of Emerson's like handprints and send every birthday. And I'm like, that's great and that's good. But that went out the window like as life went on and we got busy. And I think that's okay. Like, I don't think she expects that.
yeah,
Yeah, it definitely changes. Like I
yeah.
can't even do that for my own like self. Like
Exactly.
I
Yeah. No, I'm like, oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's so great. So Samantha, you had mentioned earlier that you host a podcast called Going There. And so you talk a lot there about, just different conversations that Christians are having, that the church is having. So when it comes to adoption and even foster care, what do you think are some of the things that the church really misses when talking about this and maybe specifically birth families?
Mm. Okay. Well, I'll just speak again. Everything I'm saying is my own experience. First, I'll say our local church, it's been really cool. I was telling you before we got on, I have a lot of friends who have recently become foster parents because a few years ago, our church did a really big call of like, hey, this is what scripture says about caring for the vulnerable in many different ways. And one of the emphasis was on foster care. And it's like, we as a church, if we have this many foster children in our county, in our state, and we are at this big church with these families, with means, with space, it's like, obviously that I'm sure people get annoyed when it's like, well, we could just foster. There's more that goes into it. But I will say they provided really cool opportunities. It's like, maybe you can't be the one to have a placement, but could you be a support for transportation, appointments, visits, meals? And they just started offering almost like a season of classes and information opportunities for people in our church. And so in the last 2 years, I have 4 people in my community that have started fostering, and I've watched a few end up with adoptions when they were like, we're just fostering, we wouldn't adopt. I've watched like so many cool things happen through that. So I will say I'm really thankful for our local church for having such a healthy, I would say, emphasis on that. I think overall, I don't know if this is exactly what you're talking about, but something I've noticed over my 7 years now as an adoptive mom that really bothers me is people viewing Justin and I, that's my husband, as like saints in this whole thing of like, oh my gosh, you guys are so incredible for doing this. Like, and it's just so odd because I don't think if we like really read about what it means to be kind of adopted, even in like I was just studying Ephesians for a full year, so I feel like I'm really like stuck in Ephesians, but it talks a lot about like how we are adopted into God's family. And like that sounds like so Christianese and like we're adopted as God's daughter, like that sounds so crazy. But when you actually study what that means and how then he views us, I think even in the church world, sometimes there's almost this overemphasis on families who foster and adopt where it shouldn't be so unique. It shouldn't be so out of the realm. Of course, it's like interesting to people because I just think it's unknown. And there's a lot of, people see Justin and I walk in with these like adorable kids, and our family doesn't look like your typical family in the Midwest. And so that's going to create intrigue. But that's something that bothers me sometimes is that there's just this like, we're put on this pedestal of like what we've done. And it's like, that is just like not the way I think we should think about it or that it actually plays out. And then on top of that, I mean, the birth family thing, I have just heard the most just like insensitive, disrespectful things said. I think it just has to be this like huge misunderstanding of um why people would be in the position that they are in to place a child for adoption. And I think the church as a whole likes to talk about adoption of like, oh my gosh, they chose life and that's to be praised and celebrated. But then in the way that they respond to certain aspects of it that start getting nitty gritty, it's like, why are we surprised? Like, we see some of the same behavior in the church. Like, why are we surprised that
Mm.
these women who, sometimes they didn't grow up with a father figure, they were had at a young age from their mom, they don't have someone that looks at them and says like you are loved, you don't need to find that through relationships or this or that. Like, why do we expect that this wouldn't be happening? And I think for the questions I've gotten sometimes it's like that is just really, you're just being ignorant to the realities, I think, of a sinful world. And I don't know, like I don't know what else to do about that other than I think there's just a huge lack of knowledge or understanding about how foster and adoptive families work. And I get it though. Like even some of my friends who foster, it's like I don't get how that whole system works. I've learned. I think if we asked more questions, you'd be surprised at then how you have a different understanding about things. But I don't know.
Yeah, I love
Yeah.
that the church offers resources. Like,
Mhm.
that's not, I mean, Abby, like, what, I don't, do we know any other churches that give like classes and information like that? I don't.
No, I mean, the very first foster care informational meeting that I went to when we were thinking about possibly doing that, it was at a church, but it wasn't offered by the church necessarily. It was like a meeting space. Um, and then, like, I definitely know of churches who offer support after the fact. Like, once you have a child who's in your home and let us bring you diapers, let us bring you meals, like all of that. But just like some of that initial, like these conversations that we're having even here of like all these things we didn't think about or we didn't know about or didn't expect beforehand. those are so key and so important, and there's not many people having them.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's good.
I agree. Like I see the support, like the
Mhm.
diapers and the things
Mhm.
like that, but I don't know, like the extra, like I want more. Like
Yeah.
Yeah.
really what are people getting into? If we're going to tell people, "Hey, you're called to care for the orphans."
Mhm.
I'm glad that like, there's different ways. Like it sounds like your church does a good job of being like not everyone has to do foster
Right.
care, but there are other ways to support, but like what else are you doing to provide information here so that you're not going in
Yeah.
blind?
Well, and I remember when we had adopted Emerson and then we were praying through and talking through like what our next route of growing our family would be. And we were considering doing foster care. And we went to one of the informational meetings at our church and they had a panel of families. And we do go to a pretty large church. They had a family of panels who had been, some had been like foster parents for a long time. Some were just like going through the classes and they were almost, I feel like a lot of times people scare you with foster care in the process, but it was like a good kind of thing. It was like, here's what our situations have been like. Here's what I think you need to um, think through before you commit to this. And I think that is helpful because, yeah, like you said, not everyone is in the place where they emotionally mentally, physically can take that on at the time. And that's maybe why there is more like burnout with families who want to foster and aren't able to do it super. I mean, there's a lot of reasons, but they just were really honest about it. And then they were like, okay, so you're not able to start getting certified to foster. Well, would you be willing to get, I know it's different state by state, but could you be a respite provider? In Missouri, you don't have to be certified. So, like, I have a friend who I haven't been taken up on it yet, but they have a placement right now, and I'm like, hey, I would love for a few hours, like, to help out. I mean, that's a way I can serve the people that are doing what I am not, if I'm honest, willing or able to do right now. And same with like meals or all the different resources and just going to a church. Again, I know this is like I should be more thankful. I'm realizing too of like what my church provides and offers, but we walk in on a Sunday morning and diversity is like really important with me, my kids, and it's dictated how we've chosen schools and where we go to church even. And it's cool to walk in and I can be like, oh, there's that family that's fostering like 4 boys right now and there's that family that just adopted and it's really cool to walk into a church where that is very much I would start to say, like, becoming more and more the norm.
It's
And
awesome.
and I'll say this too, I was having a conversation, with a friend who they've adopted, and I'm like, "What is it right now?" I've gotten, like, 2 people call me this week asking about adoption. I This person just finished adoption, like, "Where's all this coming from?" And not to say, like, because we did it and they have seen, but I do think it is helpful. Again, like, please don't hear me say anything that my husband and I have done, but I think it's cool to say, like, there are people in our community who have watched, maybe even from afar, Justin and I adopt and how it looks like for our family now and how it just functions. And maybe that's given them a little bit more like confidence to say like, I could do that, or I didn't know anything about that, but I've seen that with them. And like God has now put that on my heart. Like I think that's happened more and more in our community as people have fostered. It's like, oh, I wouldn't be doing it alone because those people in my small group, they've done it now for the past year. Like, okay, maybe I could do that. Does that make sense too? It's almost like it's catching fire in
Yeah,
our
yeah.
community a little bit more, which is really cool to see.
Yeah, because like, we don't wanna do things alone. Like, we wanna be part
Yeah.
of community. We wanna be surrounded by people who have done the things that maybe we desire to, and I think it's just, like, obviously, it's something that God calls you to, and He makes a way, right? Like, He provides everything that you need to go forward with an adoption or with foster care, but at the same time, it's like you need that little nudge sometimes, right? Like something happens in your life that creates that little push. And so it could be seeing your family sitting in church. It could be seeing you at the grocery store or at the ball field or wherever. So I think that's really
Yeah.
cool.
It like demystifies it.
It
Like,
Yeah.
does. Yeah.
and like you said, like you don't my husband also has that as a pet peeve. He hates when people are like, "Oh, good for you. You guys are so amazing." He's like, "Well, you could be amazing too." Like,
It's like, hey, you want to sign up? you a
Yeah.
prescription.
Here's the number.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I think there's that fine balance. Like, I want people to be encouraged. Like, I want people to be encouraged and feel empowered and be like, yes, like I could do this too in whatever way, like foster, be open to adoption or just foster or whatever. But also don't do it blindly. Like, I kind of it's like this fine balance between I don't want you to go into this thinking like, "Oh, it's gonna be like roses and it's gonna be beautiful and nothing ever is gonna like that's not reality, and it is messy, but so is biological children, like, let's be honest."
Yeah, and I mean, yeah, you see adult children that are raised, in perfect situations that yeah, you really don't that's what I was kinda talking about in the beginning too. It's almost like it immediately pops the bubble of like it's going to be easy and you have full control. Like when you are in the waiting process or if you're in the foster care placement process, like you have zero control. And if anything, I think that's such a gift that sets you up in parenting to be like, oh, I already experienced that. So I'm good at that now. I'm good at like sitting back and just letting it go. I mean, easier said than done, of course, but yeah, that's good.
I heard this about having 3 kids. I don't have 3. Abby, you'll have to tell me maybe when the girls get a little older, but I heard this that once you have 3, because you're no longer one-on-one, you're like, "I have no control," and then things get easier. I don't know, but that's what it makes me think of. You're just like, "Whatever, like, I don't have any control."
Yeah, that's so funny. I saw a good friend of mine, speaking of foster care, I know she wouldn't mind me sharing this because she's been public about it, like on social media, but they have 3 biological kids. They were one of those families that were like just out of the blue, like, we're going to foster when our church really started talking about it a few years ago. And so they've had a placement now for about a year. And she was pregnant, not super expecting that. She's about halfway through a pregnancy. So with her 4th biological, they have this placement, like I said, that they've had for a year from like 3 days old and whatever is going to happen with that situation. And I'm off social media this summer, but I was with a group of friends the other night and they were like, "Oh my gosh, did you hear so and so's taking another placement?" And I was like, "No, they're not. No, they're not. They're not. I really know they're not." And then called her. I'm like, "Are you taking another placement?" And she's like, yeah, we are, and I see her last night at our kids, like, swim meet, and she's just rolling in with this, like, tiny newborn baby, and then this one-year-old, and she's pregnant, and she's chasing her other kids, and I'm like, we also have to acknowledge there's certain people that just have different capacities because
Yes.
that
That's so true.
I mean, her kids can be jumping off, like, like, staircases, and she's just, like, so chill about it, where my heart rate is on, like, overdrive, and so, yeah, it's cool to get to watch that too, but I'm like and I can be confident that, like, that is not my capacity, and that's okay too.
Thought that was my capacity for the longest time. I was like, "Oh, I'm gonna have, like, 6 kids at least."
Yep.
No. No.
Yeah. Yeah, isn't that and it takes, I think, a lot of courage to be able to say that too. Sometimes, like, I have a lot of these young college girls that are in our life being in a college town and, like a few of them, they get married and they're just like, "We're gonna have like 17 children." And it's like, yeah, like have the first. And then, I mean, it's one of those annoying like adages of like, as you're older, you just reflect back and yeah, you just see things differently. You have more wisdom, but
Yep. You
Yeah.
don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
exactly.
What do you think is next for you, Samantha, and your family? Are you thinking you'll pursue adoption again? Are you happy with 2 kids?
Oh, that's so
What's your capacity?
Yeah,
that's
what's your
so
capacity?
So, I don't know, maybe this can be helpful for people. I have always been really ready to adopt again way sooner than my husband has been. So, and that you asked that. I have all of my paperwork to start our home study again right now, like sitting piled up in on my desk. Like I asked for it in January, printed it all off and like started filling it out. And it is just still sitting there to the point that our consultant that we've used in the past, she knew that I was like kind of interested in starting again. She even emailed me like, "Hey, like, is anyone there? Like, or I thought you were kind of going to start this." And it's just so funny. Like my husband, he's okay with me starting the paperwork and stuff. Like he's just not fully there, and that happened last time. And I got really caught up in just like what I wanted the age gap with our children to be. And, there are so many unknowns with adoption. Like sometimes it's really hard for me when I'm around all these people that, they're like, well, I'm going to start trying to get pregnant with this 3rd child on this month and they're going to be this month apart. And like a lot of times it works out like that for people. oftentimes it also doesn't. But then I can start to get like that with adoption too. So I'm really ready for our third adoption. And well, I say that my husband's like ready to inch closer. My son just turned 3, and I honestly thought that our age gap between our second and third would be a lot closer. It's just hilarious. It's like, why do I even think? Even if I
That's right.
tried, like maybe God would have us waiting for 3 years this time.
Mhm.
You just don't even know. But I think what's happening, I like printed all that paperwork out and I'm sitting here and I'm like, there is something in me that's not quite ready. And I think the only reason I really was pushing is because I feel like it is time for a third child and all of my friends are on their third and fourth. And not even that, like I'm ready. I was explaining this to a friend. I'm like, I'm ready for the baby. I'm not ready for the process again. Like, I don't
Mm.
know if you guys can relate to that. Like, once you know, you know. Like, I'm helping a girl in our church right now that's going through the same consultant group as us. They just finished their home study. They made their profile book, and it's like, ooh, part of me just like wishes I didn't know like what's to come in the best way, but also in the really hard way. It's like very isolating to be in the waiting. It's very emotionally draining. And I have 2 other kids that I'm pouring my emotional and physical energy out to. And so I think part of me, I'm trying not to let it be like sort out in my mind, like, is that fear of what's to come? We've also had 2 relatively like as simple an adoption as you can get, like simple, straightforward adoptions. And so I think
Mhm.
part of me is like, what's gonna happen this next time? Is it just gonna be this like it's almost like when you submit that paperwork, like you just are like, whoa, I'm about to go on a ride. And I think I just know I'm not ready for that mentally. And I was actually praying this morning about like, okay, God, you have been so faithful in leading exactly, obviously, what children you had intended for our family perfectly to us in the perfect time. Why am I feeling any way that you would not be faithful for that for this next child and whenever that is and whoever that is? And honestly, I had a lot of peace just this morning of like, why am I getting bogged down by this? Because I was raised, I'm the oldest of 4. We are all really close in age, and I think ideally, I used to think that that's how it would look like for my family. And my daughter's 7, my son just turned 3, and it has been so sweet to have that age gap where I have gotten really, really intentional time with each child at home. And I think even the adoption aspect of that, like I've gotten to really know each kid in the way that feels I feel like it's a blessing. And so I'm like, I also we started this really young. I'm like, who cares if we wait and there's a bigger age gap? Like I'm still young where I would be like a young mom in that. I don't know. Like, do you guys ever feel that way too with adoption? Just like when you don't have the control and it's like you want the end result, but you're not ready to step into the like what's next of it all. I don't know if that's relatable, but
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's adoption is so interesting because I think people on the outside look at it and say, you actually have a lot of control. Like you get to like fill out your
Well,
paperwork of like, I'd like my child to look like this or not have this or whatever, like all these different things. Like you get to know a lot before, but in the same way, like it's hard because you have to say no in some
mhm,
cases. And like we've talked about this with foster care too, where you may be called for a placement and it's like you have to say yes or no. And
mhm.
when you're having a biological child, that's a little bit different. Like that whole scenario looks very different. So I don't know. I think like for me personally, adoption for us has always come at like the craziest time. Like it's never been like, okay, we've got all of our ducks in a row. We've got the room waiting. We've got everything good to go. Like it always is like it has come at crazy times. And so I don't know. I mean, part of it is like you could start the process now. And like you said, it could be 3 years until a birth mom sees your profile and chooses you. Who knows?
yeah. And I feel like I had to learn that with our last adoption with James because it's like Justin wasn't ready until one day he really was ready. And like it's again, I think it's just really changing the time of like, yeah, I don't need it to be like perfect and easy because that's never gonna happen once you have multiple kids. But there has just been this like unsettled part of me that's like, I was really trying to push this along sooner, but maybe I'm not like peace. Like I don't have the peace to start it tomorrow. And it's just so weird because like my daughter's situation, it was like we waited 2 weeks and were chosen by a birth mom on the first time we presented our profile. And then my sons, we waited about 9 months and we were chosen the first time we presented, but it was like a longer situation. And then he was born 2 weeks later. So like, yeah, you just that's funny you say people from the outside think that you have control because I've actually like not experienced that at all. I think people recognize it's like I don't even think people in my life, I guess, know that you can have those preferences and like we've never
Yeah.
preferenced gender. I mean, yeah, that's like a lot of nitty-gritty stuff, but I think it is wild of like most people look at me like, whoa, that is crazy that you literally submit paperwork and then it's like it could be in a few weeks or it could be like a baby that's already born or it could be like 2 years. And with pregnancy, it's like once you're pregnant, you know, in 9 months, you're going to have this child and you have a way to start mentally preparing for, yeah, like your body has a physical way, like hormonally of preparing for what that's going to feel like. And it's just so bizarre when it's like it could literally happen overnight. Same with foster care. It's like you could get a placement, that placement could change. Like it's just, it's very out of control in the best way, though. Like it's so freeing to be in that position, in my opinion.
Yeah, I feel like it's out of control at all of them. Like, even with pregnancy, I'm like, you can have a miscarriage. You could, like there's so many things even within that. Well, and like just the chaos of like trying to get pregnant and then it not happening. Like, there's no control in having a child, like having a child, regardless of like how you go about it.
For sure. Don't you think people have a false sense of that though? Like, I guess in my experience, if you haven't walked through that, like, I told you guys I had a late term loss and then I had 2 other earlier miscarriages. If you haven't had that or if you haven't struggled to conceive, it's like that is just not what I hear. I mean, I heard a girl the other day literally going down to the like, we are trying this month because we want the baby born and that like, and I'm like, wow, that is insane that like you think you have that much control. And what's crazy is like, maybe that will work out for them in that way. But like, I agree with you. You really don't at all. Or even health wise, something about adoption that I think is interesting. Like, you can have all the preferences and there's wisdom in that. And there is like wisdom in praying through and thinking through like what can our family, what's capacity and like what can we take on taking into account other members of your family and everything. But it's like we don't have the control either. I mean, I was diagnosed with cancer when I was 3 years old. Like my parents didn't see that coming. There was nothing that they could have done, nothing my mom could have done in her pregnancy. She had never drank, never smoked, like nothing. And, there's just so many things in our life that again, it's that perspective. It's that you don't know what you don't know, but I do think there is this lack of overall sometimes faith in our lives to think of like I want to be prepared to face whatever God has for me in a way that isn't like I'm going to conquer it on my own, but that I am going to be ready for what God has in store. And that means I'm going to be humble. And that means I'm going to know Him and I'm going to know His word and I'm going to be walking with Him because truly, truly, we do not know what tomorrow is going to bring. And so I totally agree with you that pregnancy is just as out of control. It's just that I don't think most people have what I think is the gift to see it that way.
Mm.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I think in general, like, we just want control. And any way that we think that we're going to get that, we're like, okay, I'll have control here. I'll do it this way. And it's like, yeah, exactly what you're saying. Like, we have to walk by faith and we have to just be humble and open to what God puts in our life. Like, I mean, and it could be our spouse. Like, our spouse could pass away suddenly. Like, we just don't have control of our lives in this way. And the sooner we accept that and really can put our trust in Christ to say, okay, like, I'm here,
Yeah.
do your will.
Yeah. And it's interesting because I don't want anyone to hear me say that I have that fully figured out because there are definitely things that I see in myself and I've had to learn over the years of like when really big things feel very out of control for me, I see myself cling to like little dumb things that I'm like grasping for control in, whether it's my house feeling put together and my kids doing this properly and being obedient, whatever. Like I will try to like micromanage friendships or I mean, I could go on and on about my mess, but I think it's good to like
Same.
be aware of that. It's like, yeah, it's almost like the more out of control the big things are in my life, like the more in my unhealth, in my untrusting, I will start like, I mean, freaking out about one speck of dust on the floor. My husband's like, sit down, something's going on. when I
It's always cleaning. It's always cleaning.
yeah, yeah. Like how I see on Instagram, like anxiety clean with me. And I'm like, I wouldn't call it anxiety cleaning for me. I call it like control cleaning. Like, at least if my house can feel clean, then no one has to know that my life is actually spiraling right now.
Yeah. Oh, it's so good. Well, Samantha, thank you so much for joining us for this conversation. It's been so fun. We have a couple of kind of closing questions that we can just leave our audience with a few encouragements. So, as an adoptive mom who maybe wants to build a relationship with their child's birth mom, what's kind of like a final encouragement you could offer?
Ooh. Hmm. Yeah, I would say just pray through if you can't get there on your own, because sometimes I don't think that we can, or just work really hard towards entering into the relationship of it is not about me, or with the mindset of it's not about me. And I think we can easily say that, like, oh, it's about the child, but like really do a heart check and say, yeah, be honest, like, it sucks when my daughter, who's now 7, has said things like, and by the way, beware, I don't know how old exactly your kids are. It's like "You're not my real mom." I've talked to many other adoptive I mean, I have friends who are like, "Oh, my 7-year-old's just saying that in a different way right now too." Like, that's developmentally appropriate. But like, yeah, it sucks to hear some of those things. And it's really hard not to make it about ourselves. But just really, like, the moment I'll feel those things, I'm like, "Lord, just, like, remind me that this is about ultimately honoring you and doing what's best for this child at the end of the day." And again, that is like a work in progress. It's no like overnight easy thing. Oh, like I'll start doing that. It's like it is a just like grinding out in the heart of like, how can I grow in this? Like, Lord, you have to help me grow in this because I won't be able to do it on my own. At least for me with my faith. But also just, yeah, like really taking recon of like, if you can say that, make sure you really mean that, because it's easier said than done.
That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. Well, thank you, Samantha, for being with us today. And you guys, I will link her podcast at the bottom of ours, so you guys should check it out. It is really great and super encouraging. And if anything we said today made you laugh, cry, or feel seen, be sure to send this to a friend. And we will see you guys next time.
Thank you for having me.